It all started with a blood trail. Small at first, just a few dark stains on the cracked pavement. But as Officer Jake Carter followed the trail, his breath grew heavier. His grip tightened around his weapon. He already knew where it led. Max, his K9 partner, was out there wounded and alone. Minutes earlier, a call had come in. An armed robbery, high-speed pursuit, then a violent crash. But what no one had anticipated was the ambush. A gang of ruthless bikers, desperate and cornered, had turned their rage toward Max. And now, somewhere in the dark, he was fighting for his life. Jake wasn't just chasing criminals anymore. He was hunting them. The air was thick with gasoline and sweat. The scent of asphalt burned from the heat of the chase. The city streets were alive with sirens and distant shouts. But Jake heard only one thing. His own heartbeat, pounding like a war drum. Then he saw it. A broken collar. A smear of blood on a discarded leather jacket. They thought they could hurt his partner and walk away. They thought this was just another chase, another getaway. They had no idea what was coming for them. The night air was thick, laced with the acrid scent of burned rubber and gasoline. A lone street lamp flickered, casting long, eerie shadows over the abandoned lot where the chase had ended. The city, usually alive with distant horns and chatter, felt unsettlingly quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Jake Carter crouched low, pressing 2 fingers against a dark stain on the pavement. Blood, still fresh. His jaw clenched. Max is close. The alley ahead yawned into darkness, its narrow walls closing in like a trap. Every sound felt magnified. The distant growl of an engine, the scrape of boots on concrete, the pounding of his own pulse. Somewhere in that darkness, the gang lurked. And somewhere, Max was fighting to stay alive. Jake's grip tightened around his gun. He should have called for backup, but this wasn't about protocol anymore. This was personal. Then movement. A rustling from the shadows. "Max?" Jake whispered, heart hammering. Silence. Then a low growl. Jake exhaled sharply. That was Max, but it wasn't a sound of relief. It was a warning. Something was out there. And it wasn't friendly. Jake Carter wasn't just any officer. He was a K9 handler. A man who trusted his partner more than anyone else. Max, his Belgian Malinois, wasn't just a dog. He was his shadow, his protector, and in many ways, his only family. They had been through hell together: drug busts, hostage rescues, and high-speed chases. And now, Max was out there, wounded and alone, because of a gang that didn't know who they had just crossed. Jake had served 8 years on the force, but his training went beyond law enforcement. Before becoming a cop, he was a Marine, a man forged in fire, disciplined to never back down. Yet, despite his hardened exterior, there was one weakness in him: Max. The dog wasn't just assigned to him. He was a second chance at life after the war, a reason to keep going when everything else felt hollow. Tonight, that loyalty was being tested. Jake's mind replayed the moment over and over. How the gang of masked bikers had ambushed them during a routine patrol. How they had taunted him. How Max had lunged without hesitation. The sound of the gunshot still echoed in his head. Jake had fired back, but it was too late. Max had gone down. The gang had scattered, but not before dragging Max away into the shadows. Now, Jake wasn't a cop following a case. He was a soldier on a mission. There was one name that mattered tonight: Reaper, the leader of the gang. A ghost in the criminal underworld. No known face, no real identity, just a trail of chaos left in his wake. Jake had crossed paths with his gang before, but he hadn't expected them to retaliate like this. Stealing drugs or money was one thing, but hurting Max? That was personal. As Jake moved deeper into the abandoned lot, his grip on his gun tightened. He wasn't alone in this. His only ally tonight was Detective Sarah Lawson, his closest friend on the force. She had warned him not to go in alone, but she also knew there was no stopping him. Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Jake, you find anything?" He exhaled slowly. "Yeah. Blood." There was a pause. Then, her voice softened. "We're gonna find him." Jake wasn't sure if that was true, but one thing was certain: whoever had taken Max was about to regret it. The abandoned warehouse district loomed ahead, a maze of rusted metal and broken glass. It was the kind of place where bad things happened and never made the news. Jake parked his truck in the shadows, checking his gear, sidearm loaded, knife strapped to his boot, and a flashlight tucked into his belt. But all of that meant nothing compared to the fire burning inside him. Max was out there, hurt. Every second wasted was another second closer to losing him. Sarah's voice came through his earpiece. I ran a trace on the license plates from one of the bikes. The gang's been using a scrapyard on the outskirts as their hideout. You sure you don't want backup? Jake's jaw tightened. No time. If I wait, Max might not make it. A heavy silence followed. Then Sarah exhaled. Be careful. With that, Jake stepped into the darkness. Jake moved with trained precision, hugging the walls as he approached the entrance to the scrapyard. The place was sprawling. Piles of twisted metal, burned-out cars, and a few makeshift sheds where the gang likely holed up. But what made his pulse spike was the dark trail of blood leading toward one of the buildings. Max's blood. Jake's grip on his gun tightened as he followed the trail, ears straining for any sound. That's when he heard it. A low, pained whimper from inside. Max. A surge of relief mixed with rage coursed through Jake. He stepped closer, peeking through a crack in the metal door. Inside, dim light flickered from a single hanging bulb. A few gang members sat around a table, laughing and drinking. And there, in the corner, chained and barely conscious, was Max. The sight nearly broke Jake. Blood matted Max's fur, his breathing shallow. But his ears perked slightly, as if he sensed his partner's presence. Jake took a breath. He had to be smart. Rushing in blind would get both of them killed. Jake circled to the back, finding a weak spot in the metal wall. With careful force, he pried it open just enough to slip inside. The moment he stepped forward, a hand clamped on his shoulder. He spun, slamming his elbow into the attacker's ribs before grabbing his wrist and twisting hard. The biker grunted in pain, but Jake didn't give him a chance to recover. He drove his knee into the guy's stomach, then slammed his head against a rusted beam. The body dropped with a thud. The noise alerted the others. What the hell was that? Jake ducked behind a stack of crates, heart pounding. He counted 3 voices. He needed to take them out quietly before they realized who they were dealing with. One of the bikers walked toward the disturbance, gripping a crowbar. As he passed by, Jake lunged, one hand over his mouth, the other yanking him backward. A swift chokehold and the biker went limp. 2 down. The last 2 were still at the table, oblivious. Jake grabbed a wrench from the floor and hurled it toward the opposite side of the room. Clattered loudly, drawing their attention. As soon as they stood, Jake was on them. The first went down with a brutal punch to the jaw. The second managed to grab a knife, slashing wildly. Jake barely dodged, feeling the blade graze his arm. He responded with a sharp kick to the knee, followed by a strike to the throat. The man gasped, staggered, and dropped. Jake stood there, chest heaving. The room was silent except for Max's weak breaths. Jake rushed to his partner, cutting the chains with a knife. "Hang in there, buddy. I got you." Max whimpered but managed to lift his head slightly. Even in pain, his eyes held trust. Jake scooped him up, cradling the dog against his chest. But just as he turned, a slow, deliberate clap echoed through the room. He froze. A figure stepped from the shadows, tall, muscular, wearing a leather jacket with a skull emblem. A scar ran down his cheek, and his eyes burned with amusement. "Reaper, you must be Carter. Man, you made a real mess in here." Jake's fingers twitched toward his gun, but Reaper smirked. "Easy now. You want your mutt to make it out alive, right?" Jake's blood ran cold. Reaper took a step closer. "I gotta admit, I underestimated you. That won't happen again. So let me give you some friendly advice." He leaned in slightly. This was just a warning. Next time, I won't be so generous." Jake's grip on Max tightened. Reaper grinned. "See you around, officer." Jake didn't hesitate. He turned and walked out, his mind already made up. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The truck's headlights cut through the night as Jake sped down the highway, one hand gripping the wheel, the other resting gently on Max. The dog lay curled on the passenger seat, his breathing uneven. Blood still clung to his fur, and every so often, a weak whimper slipped from his throat. It was a sound that carved into Jake's soul. "Just hold on, buddy," Jake muttered, his voice tight. "We're almost home." The glow of the city lights was still far in the distance. Too far. Max stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He let out a soft growl, his ears twitching slightly. It wasn't fear, it was instinct. Warning. Jake's grip on the wheel tightened. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The road behind him was empty, but something felt off. A second later, his phone buzzed. "Sarah." He hit the speaker. "Talk to me, Jake. I ran a deeper search on that gang Reaper's crew. Something's not adding up." Jake's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "They're not just a group of bikers running illegal trades. This goes deeper. Some of their members have military backgrounds. One of them, a guy named Vargas, used to work for a private security firm, Black Ops level. These guys don't just fight. They hunt." A cold sensation crept up Jake's spine. "That's not the worst part," Sarah continued. "I checked the scrapyard's security feeds. There was someone else there before you arrived. Someone watching from the shadows. I couldn't get a clear image, but, Jake, whoever it was, they left just minutes before you got Mac." Jake's eyes flickered to the side mirror. The dark highway stretched endlessly behind him. Yet the uneasy feeling in his gut refused to go away. Then, a flicker of movement. Far behind him, pair of headlights. Small at first, but gaining. Jake's heartbeat kicked into overdrive. Not just a car. A bike. It was distant, barely a dot in the rearview mirror. But it wasn't just driving. It was following. Jake exhaled slowly, fingers tightening on the wheel. "Sarah," he said evenly, "I think I've got company." A brief pause. Then Sarah's voice, sharp and alert. "How many?" "One for now. You're not far from town. If you can." The engine's roar cut through the silence. The bike surged forward, its rider hidden beneath a black helmet, visor reflecting nothing but the cold night. And then a flash. Jake barely had time to react. The windshield cracked as a bullet struck just inches from his head. "Son of a..." He yanked the wheel hard, the truck swerving violently. Max let out a sharp yelp as Jake fought to keep control. The bike closed in, another shot ringing out, this one punching into the side mirror, shattering it. "Sarah, I'm under fire," Jake barked. "Jake, get off the road. Find cover." No time. The biker was getting closer. If they got too near, they wouldn't miss again. Jake's eyes flicked across the road. Then he saw it. A side path. Gravel. Trees. A sharp incline leading toward the hills. He didn't think. He jerked the wheel. The truck skidded off the asphalt, tires screaming as they hit loose dirt. The sudden move threw the biker off for a second, forcing them to pull back. Jake's truck barreled up the incline, bouncing violently over the rough terrain. The trees swallowed them, branches scraping against metal. Silence. For a second, only the sound of Max's labored breathing filled the cab. Jake exhaled, gripping the wheel. Then a new sound, a faint hum. Jake turned his head, eyes widening. The biker had followed, and they weren't alone. Two more headlights appeared in the distance, weaving through the trees like ghosts. Jake clenched his jaw. This wasn't just an attack. This was a hunt, and it wasn't over yet. The truck jolted violently as it skidded through the rough terrain, barely holding traction. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears as he gritted his teeth, trying to keep control. The bikers were closing in, their headlights carving through the darkness like hunting eyes. Max let out a weak growl beside him, his body twitching in pain. "Just hold on, buddy," Jake murmured, his gaze flicking between the road and the pursuing riders. The lead biker, the one who had fired at them, was barely 20 yards away now. Jake could see the glint of metal in his hand, a pistol aimed straight at the truck. Jake's instincts took over. He slammed the brakes. The truck lurched to a screeching halt, kicking up a cloud of dust and gravel. The sudden stop sent the biker flying forward, unable to react in time. The rider lost control, the bike veering off to the side, skidding along the dirt before flipping violently into the underbrush. One down, but the others weren't stopping. Jake spotted a second biker accelerating toward them, a machete gleaming in his grip. No time to think. He reached under his seat, fingers closing around cold steel. His shotgun. With a swift motion, he yanked it up, kicked open the door, and took aim. Boom! The blast tore through the night, hitting the biker square in the chest. The force sent him toppling off his bike, his body tumbling into the dirt. Jake exhaled sharply, his arms still rigid from the shot. Then a sound, an engine. The last biker. And he wasn't backing down. Jake barely had time to react before the remaining rider gunned straight for him, the roar of the bike deafening as it charged. The biker wasn't holding a gun. He wasn't wielding a blade. He was coming to ram Jake down. Jake dove to the side just as the bike shot past, missing him by inches. He hit the ground hard, dust kicking up around him. But he wasn't down for long. The biker circled back, the engine howling. Jake rolled onto his back, shotgun in hand, aiming as the rider came at him again. He had one shot. He took it. The blast tore into the bike's front tire. The effect was instant. The front wheel crumpled, sending the rider flying forward in a brutal somersault. He crashed into the ground with a sickening crunch, his helmeted head bouncing once before going still. Silence. Only the distant hum of the wind remained. Jake slowly pushed himself up, his body aching. His gaze flicked to the wreckage of the bikers. Their assault shattered. It was over. He turned back to the truck, rushing to Max's side. The dog's breathing was shallow, but his eyes were open, flickering weakly toward Jake. Jake gently ran a hand over his fur. "We're going home, boy. You hear me? We made it." Max let out a soft whine. Jake climbed back into the truck, his hands still trembling. He started the engine, casting one last look at the fallen bikers before driving away. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. They had crossed a line, and Jake would make damn sure they never got another chance. The road stretched endlessly ahead, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Jake gripped the wheel tightly, his mind replaying the events of the past few hours. The violence, the blood, the cold finality of it all. Max lay beside him, his breathing steadier now, the makeshift bandage around his wound holding. Jake reached down, running his fingers gently through the dog's fur. "You're a fighter, buddy," he murmured. Just like always, but deep inside he knew this fight had changed something in him. For years, Jake had trained dogs for war, for search and rescue, for protection. But tonight it was different. Tonight, the enemy hadn't been some faceless adversary on a distant battlefield. It had been lawless men, predators who thrived on cruelty, who had no respect for life, not even the life of a loyal, devoted animal. And that was a line Jake refused to let them cross again. He glanced at Max, thinking about what the dog had endured, how he had fought despite the pain. And suddenly, Jake understood. Loyalty wasn't just about standing by someone's side. It was about fighting for them, protecting them, even when the odds seemed impossible. Max had done that for him, and Jake had done it right back. As the sun rose, painting the horizon in soft golds and reds, Jake allowed himself a breath of relief. The night was behind them, but the scars, both seen and unseen, would remain. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some battles weren't about revenge or justice. Maybe they were about proving to yourself, and to the ones you love, that you'd go to the ends of the earth for them. He gave Max one last pat before focusing on the road ahead. Because no matter what came next, one thing was certain: they had survived. And that was enough. If you enjoyed this intense ride with Jake and Max, don't forget to hit that like button and let us know what you thought about their battle for survival. What do you think's coming next for Jake? Will he keep pushing forward? Or will the past finally catch up with him? Drop your thoughts and predictions in the comments below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more heart-pounding stories and thrilling adventures. Stay tuned, because there's more action on the way, and you won't want to miss it. Join our community of fellow thrill seekers, and together, We'll dive into the wildest, most gripping tales out there,